Welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast, in association with Simcoe Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bogert. Now, some of you probably already know me as Skippy. I will start by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jim Reid. Now, Jim Reid is someone, I've got to tell you, who really punches above his weight. Just before doing this podcast, I was speaking to Andrew Clark, one of our trainers. And I said, I'm about to do an interview with Jim Reid. He said, Jim Reid from up in Scotland, Aberdeen. Listen, he runs a brilliant business. And we're going to get into how a small independent, and I hope I don't offend him when I said that, but where someone, an independent dealer, really does punch above their weight and has this reputation, what he's done to build that reputation. So without further ado, I just want to say welcome aboard, Jim, and I really appreciate your time on this podcast.
I appreciate the invitation, Simon, and some really kind words there as well. Thank you.
Well, listen, this podcast is all about sharing tips and ideas and best practice to sell more cars, make more money, improve more hours in the service department, sell more parts. Can I ask you, is there any tips or advice or any nugget of information that you'd like to share that you think, I wish I knew that when I started? Anything that springs to mind?
Is there any nugget? I mean, there's bound to be loads of nuggets out there, isn't there? I think we're all very bad at selling up, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of frowned upon now that, you sell inclusive. So you be very careful of that as well. I think, advice-wise, and this is maybe not answering the question, Simon, but, what I'm a great believer in, and this is maybe why I'm not going to die a millionaire, but I think we're all very guilty of how can you put it? Chasing the pound. We always look at the profit. Always about the money side of things. How much money you've made against that deal, how much money you've made that week, this month, whatever. If you turn it on its head a little bit and you say, chase the experience, chase the delivery of the experience to the customer, the money comes, Simon.
Yeah.
The money is a secondary thing. The money is the payment for delivering a service. And if you think of it like that, you'll have a different mindset altogether. Don't chase the money. Don't look at customers. I was always told, when I was getting trained when I was young, those are pound notes walking about out there. I don't see that. I see those as people with stories who are friends, potential friends, who will come back and look after you. And those are your repeat customers for time and time again. If you treat them like bags of money, guess what? You'll only sell one car for them. You'll never sell a repeat. You'll never service the car ever in their lifetime. You've got to look after them. You've got to be repeat. And if you don't have repeat, you're always filling auto trainers' pockets to try and top up that new customer leads. That's why I don't have to.
Great advice. And I've got to tell you, I see that on your website. You look at your website, you see all of your team there. Okay, I can see it's a family business. You've got Gail, you've got Liam there, you've got Laura, you've got so many other people there. But I think you can see your team there. I think people do buy people.
They do.
100%. They buy. Was that part of your decision to put your name on the business to start with, Jim?
That goes back right for a start, and when I was, I had so many different names of what the business could be named and whatever, and it's a really exciting time, isn't it, when you're thinking of a name for your company. And this guy actually said to me, he says, Jim, the best, he says, you look after your customers. And I says, yes. He says, well, if you look after your customers, use your name. It's the best thing you can ever do. He says, because you can't hide from your name. If you look after your customers, it forces you to look after your customers, your name. And it's so true. And the amount of times I've actually said that when customers are kind of a bit undecided, I would say, look, I'm not here to rip you off. After all, it's my name that's on the door. It's my reputation that's on the line. It's my name that's going to be tarnished. Would I do that if I was going to, would I rip you off just to tarnish my name? I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, so true.
Get my point, isn't it?
Yeah, love it. And today, we've got someone talking about the parts and the service side of the business. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Cowan from Pro Talk. It's Jeff Cowan's Pro Talk. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
How you doing, sir?
Very good, thank you. With the service advisors,
Right.
sometimes in a business, they're almost seen as the forgotten part of the business. You've
Right.
sold cars as well, and you
Right.
started selling cars first, and then it was like, go and have a look at the service department, almost
Right.
as an afterthought. And again, something I was taught by my first service manager. He said, Simon, never forget, car salespeople, they only sell the first car. It's the service people, they sell the second, the third, the ongoing sale. And I think it's so true. How often have you been on that counter and the customer comes up and says, hey, Jeff, that new hybrid technology, is it any good or not? Because Bob in sales is telling me it is, but you'll tell me the truth there. I want to ask, is that attitude changing yet? Because listen, I've been in the motor trade since I was 17 years old. I'm 49 now, so that's too many years, but that was the attitude when I first started. Is it changing or is it still there, do you think?
No, I think the service advisor has a tremendous effect on whether or not that customer is going to buy that second car at that dealership. Because it, like you said, the salesperson sees them once, the service advisor sees them anywhere, depending on the vehicle and how it's driven, 2 to 4 times a year. So if the customer just drives that car for 3 years, that's 12 times.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I even take it a step further because that's always been one of the things. Sales sells the first one, service sells the second, but service can also cost you the second because if you don't have a service advisor that knows how to walk around the car, how to interact with the customer, build a relationship, and get the sale, then here's what happens. The vehicle, the client gets the vehicle, they drive it for 100,000 kilometers, and they look back over the 100,000 kilometers and they say, when the salesperson told me this, he said that I'd never have to do anything to it, but well, let me back up for a second. So they come in, they drive it for 100,000 miles, or 100,000 kilometers. And the whole time they're driving it, the service advisor never upsells them on the preventative maintenance, never helps them out with the repairs and the like. So then at the end of that 100,000 kilometers, the customer looks back and says, hey, I'm getting ready to buy a new car. And I don't know if I want one of these because the salesperson told me this one would last me for 100,000 kilometers and cost me almost no money. But the last 2 years alone has cost me $2,000 or $3,000, to keep it running. So why would I want to go back and buy another one? Now, it cost them that much because they never did the service, but the customer will never admit that. So they go someplace else because they don't see the value. But at the flip side, if you've got a service advisor that knows how to build that relationship and sells them what they need all along the way, the oil changes, the maintenance, the repairs, and the tires and all that stuff, then at 100,000 kilometers, the customer looks back and says, you know what? The salesperson told me if I took care of this car, and I did, then I should be able to drive at 100,000 kilometers with little or no expense. And that really happened. So I think I'm going to go back and get another one because obviously this is a great car. So yes, they can sell the second car if they're selling the customer the whole time they're driving the vehicle, the preventative maintenance, the repairs as they're needed. And that's where I think a lot of it falls apart because most advisors I've met don't know how to sell or they won't sell.
Now, today it's my privilege and honor to say hi to Steve Faulkner. Now, Steve is the founder and the CEO of Automotive Solutions Group. What would you like to leave the listener to this podcast? What's your best tip or idea or something they could put in place immediately, almost now, and get a result? Any tip that you'd like to leave the listeners?
I think what I would do, well, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody. That's most important because you've invested quite a lot of time listening to these dulcet tones from Stoke-on-Trent. I'm not talking about Simon. I think the second thing is you kind of have to look at the customer journey in your business. Now, a couple of years I invested in GE were around Lean Six Sigma. And one tool that I picked up and I've used so many times since is to map out the customer journey as if I'm the customer to identify the non-value add or the waste and try and get rid of it. So if I'm doing things that add no value to the customer, I'm either doing them for regulatory purposes or operational critical to quality items. But outside of that, the entire journey should be a journey that everybody understands and understands really well, that everybody can demonstrate as a standard operating procedure, and they know where the value points are in that journey. And I think if you give everybody that map so they can actually act as if they're the customer and go through the process. And every market's different. You know, when I arrived in Dubai, and you're absolutely right, we'd ask the customer to sign 66 checks, deposit checks, 60 payments, 3 checks just in case he got his signature wrong. And
how long did it take the poor customer to do that?
Oh, and that was just the checks. You know, think about all the paperwork that went with it. So it was a very manual. It felt like going back 10 years, if not 20. Mm. But now things have caught up, and the process is becoming more and more digital. Mm-hmm. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to think that your 16-year-old, and I'm not trying to classify everybody the same, but your 16-year-old and your 80-year-old could look exactly the same, and they could look very different. And what we've got to do, and our job is to work out who they are, what they like, what they dislike, and we've got to work out how to protect them and the business. So whether it's through warranty programs, through the workshop, residual value insurance, if that's what we need to provide, that's what we need to provide. Mm. And driving that retention, you know, really focusing on holding on to your customer. Because at the moment there's less cars, which means there's less customers, there's less frequency in your workshop. So we've got to work harder to keep what we've got.
Today I'm joined by Mike Jones. Mike Jones is, for the people in the UK, will know that Mike Jones was working with ASE for a long, long time. I know that the world's changing now. I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit about what he's doing now and the future. So firstly, I just want to say welcome aboard and thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
This podcast is all about sharing tips and ideas to sell more cars, make more profit. That's what it's all about. And there's always these little nuggets of ideas that you hear every now and then. There's one I believe I need to give credit to your father for, and that's the phrase, promise me. I'm almost certain with him, I heard this little phrase, if someone's not going to get the tires changed, he said, listen, would you do me a favor? Just promise me you get them done by the end of the week. Okay, because with that tread on it, you're doubling your braking distance. And it's just a great little line. So can I ask you, is there any tip, any one idea that you've picked up, any nugget that you'd like to share that might help people?
Oh God, there's thousands, and I mean that's effectively a red and amber work sale.
It is
on health and safety.
It is, yeah. Was it your father? Sorry, I'll cut you off. Was it your father I stole that from? I think it was.
Yeah, and I think it originally came from NADA in the R&D.
The top 20 group idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it wouldn't have come from a top 20 group. It would have come from somebody who actually was training it rather than it's like Jeff Cowan or something like that. I can't remember honestly who that was. But no, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, the one that I'm trying to get people to focus on better, it's more of a macro thing than a tiny little thing, but is in this retention, sort of service plan sales for used cars. Mm-hmm. We need to get some business back from the independents and keep the customer and the vehicle for longer. And so we need to be making sure that we're doing a better job dealing with the service customers. I mean, the level of follow-up is terrible. And we've got more electronic tools to help us do that now than we've ever done. But I still have exactly the same success rate as I used to have when people had got a concertina file. They put invoices in based on what month people needed following up and just phone them up. So for me, I would be using the technology to do it, but just basically, as I said, we didn't need the technology. I just need us to build a relationship with the customer. Yeah. I need us to build a relationship with the customer, speak to them on a more regular basis about their business, about their personal life. And then we will get more sales of both cars and service out of it, because I think it's still really quite poor. And as you said, the way we're actually looking at each individual customer and going, okay, no, he's got a full service due in 2 weeks. Let's try and drag that forwards. So that would be my focus into selling in after sales. Sales is a dirty word in after sales in the service department. They spend their entire time fighting with each other. So the last thing they want to be taught of is salespeople, but we're protecting the customer's time. We need to be giving them convenient solutions and the right ones for them, not pre-qualifying them, giving them the opportunity to buy. But fundamentally in the used car sales department, make sure we're selling service plans.
That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bokert through LinkedIn.